The briefing room of Fort Campbell buzzed with a muted energy that only military officers could generate, the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of precision, discipline, and well-hidden nerves. Sunlight streamed through the slatted blinds, painting the floor in sharp, golden stripes. Maps, charts, and glossy photographs of helicopters and flight paths littered the tables. The room smelled faintly of polished wood, coffee, and adrenaline. General Harris, a man whose reputation for strict discipline was only rivaled by his occasional dry humor, sat at the head of the table, reclining casually in his chair. "Captain Thompson," he began, eyes twinkling, "I've got a task for you." Laughter echoed from the officers gathered around, not the polite kind, the kind that made you feel like you were about to be the punchline of a carefully crafted joke. Sarah Viper Thompson's lips twitched, but she said nothing. Her hazel eyes, sharp as hawks, studied the general, reading him as she had learned to read so many others. Every muscle, every twitch, every micro-expression that could betray intent. The general gestured toward a mock-up of an Apache helicopter control panel, sunlight glinting off the polished surfaces. "Why don't you take the Apache for a spin, Viper?" he said, a playful smirk dancing across his lips. His tone was casual, teasing, but everyone in the room knew him. When Harris smiled, it was rarely harmless. A wave of laughter followed. It was a sharp, pointed kind of laughter, the kind that isolates rather than includes. A couple of lieutenants snickered, the senior pilots chuckled, and one even barked a sharp laugh that echoed off the high ceilings. "Oh, this'll be good," muttered someone near the back. Sarah's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She had heard this tone before. The general wasn't challenging her. He was testing her in the cruelest way possible, making her the subject of amusement under the guise of a joke. She shifted her weight, hands resting calmly on the table, hiding the tiny tremor of anticipation she felt. She had been training for months in secret, running flight simulators late into the night, studying engine mechanics, reading aerodynamic manuals cover to cover. And here they were, assuming she didn't have the skill, or worse, assuming she wouldn't have the nerve. Her mind flicked through scenarios. If she accepted, it would prove everything she had worked for, but if she failed, the humiliation would be devastating. The laughter in the room seemed to stretch, hanging in the air like thick smoke. Sarah glanced around, nodding faces. Some officers' smirks were genuine. They thought this was all in jest. Others, the more senior, were curious, intrigued. Even the ground crew peeking in through the door seemed unsure of what to expect. The general leaned forward slightly, resting a hand on the mock-up controls. "Don't get me wrong," he said, voice still laced with humor. "I'd love to see you fail, could be entertaining. But if you somehow succeed, I might, I don't know, collapse in awe or maybe shame. Either way." Sarah's lips curved into a subtle, almost imperceptible smile. The teasing, the sarcasm, it all fueled her rather than deterred her. She had spent her life defying expectations. The first time she flew a Cessna at 16, everyone in her small town had laughed, telling her it was a boy's world. She had grinned, taken off, and landed flawlessly. Every comment, every doubt had been ammunition for her determination. She looked at the general again. The room was quieting, officers watching her for the first real sign of reaction. Then, without a word, she simply nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Not defiance, not agreement, but a signal she understood the challenge and she was ready. A lieutenant muttered, "She's not actually going to," before catching himself. Everyone in the room froze slightly. Even the general paused, brow raised, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Sarah had said nothing, yet her silence carried weight. The room's laughter had died down, replaced by a tension that felt almost electric, the kind you feel right before a storm hits. She stood, moving toward the exit with measured confidence, each step echoing softly on the polished floor. The officers parted instinctively, sensing the shift in energy. Whispers followed her. "Viper's serious. I didn't think she's going to shock him." The general remained seated, smirk fading slightly as he watched her walk away. The hangar doors loomed ahead, sunlight spilling into the cavernous space, reflecting off the sleek fuselage of the Apache parked within. Its black and gold paint shimmered and the rotors stood like poised wings, waiting. The machine exuded power, menace, and precision. To most, it was intimidating. To Sarah, it was an instrument of mastery, a puzzle she could solve with knowledge and skill. She approached the cockpit, hand brushing against the cold metal. The vibration from the engines idling beneath the fuselage resonated in her fingertips. She exhaled slowly, calm, focused. Every training session, every simulation, every late-night study session had led to this moment. No one knew how far she had prepared. No one knew how deeply she had committed herself to this exact test. The general's voice crackled over the comms from the hangar office above. "Captain Thompson, remember, don't embarrass yourself." It was half a joke, half a warning, but Sarah smiled under her helmet. "Copy that, sir," she whispered, though the general could not hear the lilt of certainty in her tone. As she climbed into the cockpit, strapping herself in, a bead of sweat traced down her temple, not from fear, but from the electricity of anticipation. She ran her fingers over the control panels, memorized the layout in her mind, and closed her eyes for a moment, visualizing the flight path, the maneuvers, the possible obstacles. She could feel the weight of every pair of eyes in the hangar watching her, waiting for her to fail. And yet, a spark of thrill ignited in her chest. Engines roared to life. The vibrations coursed through her seat, up her spine, and into her fingers. The Apache seemed alive under her touch, responsive, demanding respect. She lifted off gently, the hangar floor shrinking beneath her. Sunlight glinted off the rotor blades, spinning with hypnotic precision. The wind picked up around the open hangar doors, carrying dust, debris, and the sharp tang of ozone from the engines. General Harris leaned over the railing above, eyes narrowing. His smirk had disappeared, replaced by something new, curiosity. The room was silent except for the roar of the helicopter. Everyone knew that what they were about to witness could be history or disaster. Sarah's mind was singularly focused. She maneuvered the Apache with practiced grace, tilting slightly to adjust for the wind gusts. A small smile tugged at her lips. The general had intended a joke. She was about to rewrite the punchline entirely. And then, as the rotor blades caught the sunlight at a perfect angle, casting long shadows across the hangar floor, Sarah's heart surged. This was only the beginning. One wrong move, one hesitation, and it could all be over. But she was ready, more than ready. She glanced at the general, who watched her with a mixture of doubt, curiosity, and, unbeknownst to him, a creeping sense of worry. She was about to show him exactly what she was capable of. The hangar doors had just swung shut behind her as Sarah Viper Thompson steadied herself in the cockpit. The roar of the Apache's twin engines vibrated through her entire body, a deep, mechanical heartbeat that seemed almost alive. Sunlight glinted sharply off the polished rotors, throwing fractured light across her visor. Each reflection shimmered like a warning. One miscalculation, one slip, and the joke would become a tragedy. Below her, the hangar floor receded like a checkerboard. Mechanics and officers pressed against windows and railings, their faces a mixture of awe, disbelief, and barely restrained tension. The general's voice crackled faintly over comms, casual on the surface but layered with a new undercurrent, curiosity, maybe even fear. "Remember, Thompson," he said, his tone laced with a teasing lilt, "if you survive the first 20 seconds, I might start to reconsider my opinion of you." Sarah exhaled slowly, letting the oxygen calm the tiny pulse of adrenaline racing in her chest. Her hands were steady on the controls, each finger perfectly poised. The cockpit smelled of oil, leather, and metal, a sensory reminder that she was no longer in a simulation. This was the real deal. The roar of the engines vibrated through her gloves as she ran through the pre-flight checklist from memory, mentally ticking off each critical item: rotor integrity, hydraulic pressure, fuel flow, avionics. Everything. Then came the first gust of wind, whipping through the open doors, testing the Apache's responsiveness. The machine shuddered slightly as if challenging her. Sarah adjusted the cyclic and collective with almost imperceptible motions, coaxing the beast into stability. Below, the hangar crew gasped. Even the senior pilots, veterans who had flown countless sorties, murmured in disbelief. One muttered, "She's handling that like she's been doing it her whole life." Sarah's mind was a finely tuned orchestra of calculation and instinct. Every angle of tilt, every adjustment to thrust, every minor correction she made was precise, methodical. The general's face appeared on the control room screen through a live feed. He leaned forward, pale and rigid. Laughter had vanished from his expression, replaced by something far heavier, intrigue mixed with a creeping sense of unease. His fingers drummed the table, an almost unconscious gesture, but it only highlighted his realization. She was not just competent, she was exceptional. She turned the Apache in a tight hover, deliberately executing maneuvers that were textbook impossible for a first solo. The rotors sliced the air with a low, lethal hum, tossing small clouds of dust and debris across the hangar floor below. Sunlight reflected off the blades, creating a dizzying mosaic of movement. Officers ducked instinctively, shields of instinct against an unseen threat. And Sarah, perfectly aware of every element in the cockpit, felt a thrill surge through her veins. This was mastery in motion, a dance with physics itself. But mastery wasn't enough. Suddenly, a mechanical indicator lit up on the console, a warning she had anticipated in her simulations but never hoped to face in real life. The left rotor's hydraulic pressure fluctuated slightly, sending a ripple of instability through the aircraft. Her fingers reacted before she could even think, recalibrating the controls, adjusting thrust, tilting the rotors to compensate. The Apache shuddered violently, and a wave of tension rippled through the hangar as everyone watched. The general's jaw tightened, eyes wide. How is she doing that?" he whispered under his breath. The voice, usually filled with sardonic humor, was now a mixture of disbelief and awe. Around him, officers exchanged looks, some pale, some wide-eyed, some murmuring prayers under their breath. The joke he had thought would humiliate her, was slipping into a demonstration of near-mythical skill. Sarah's heart pounded, but not with fear. This was exhilaration. Every simulation, every late-night session running through emergency protocols, every meticulous study of rotor physics, every calculated risk had prepared her for this. She could almost feel the Apache responding to her thoughts, twisting and turning in perfect synchrony with her commands. The engines roared, the rotors whined, and she danced the machine through the artificial hazards the general had mocked her with. Then came the unexpected, a civilian drone, small but fast, streaking across her path from the hangar's far side. Alarms blared, warning lights flashing like strobe signals in her peripheral vision. The rotors whined, sensors picked up the trajectory. Every instinct screamed, avoid, neutralize, survive. She leaned forward, eyes scanning, mind calculating angles, speed, thrust, altitude. In a single, fluid motion, she banked the Apache sharply, dodging the drone by inches. The wind whistled past her ears, rotors slicing the air with terrifying precision. Below, mechanics jumped back instinctively, some shielding their eyes as if the aircraft might topple at any second. Sarah's hands danced over the controls, minute adjustments executed with the calmness of a surgeon performing open-heart surgery. A voice crackled in the comms, a ground instructor stunned. Did she just do that? She avoided it like it was nothing. Sarah's pulse raced, her adrenaline spiking, but her mind remained razor-sharp. She knew this was only the beginning. The drone, harmless on its own, had been a test, a warning, a signal that the general was watching, ready to escalate. She adjusted throttle, aligned with the simulated flight path she had mapped in her mind, and prepared for the next set of maneuvers. From above, the general leaned against the railing, jaw slack. The casual humor he had projected in the morning briefing had evaporated entirely. The smirk that had once taunted her now seemed brittle, fragile, an illusion of confidence eroded by reality. He had intended to make her the butt of the joke, but Sarah was rewriting the punchline in real time, proving a truth he had underestimated. Skill, preparation, and courage could never be faked. And then came the real test. Without warning, one of the hydraulic gauges spiked erratically. The Apache lurched violently, twisting midair, rotors whining in protest. Below, mechanics shouted, scrambling for anything they could do to intervene. Sarah's fingers tightened on the cyclic and collective, thumbs adjusting pedals with exacting precision. The aircraft responded to her every movement, teetering between catastrophe and controlled mastery. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. The general's eyes widened further. He could see her adapting, predicting, controlling. Each second she remained airborne, each maneuver she executed flawlessly, chipped away at the laughter from the morning, replaced by astonishment, disbelief, and finally, grudging respect. The tension in the hangar was palpable. Everyone could feel it, a mixture of admiration and anxiety, a silent acknowledgement that something extraordinary was unfolding. Sarah was no longer just a pilot. She was a force, a living proof of what discipline, preparation, and courage could achieve when combined with natural talent. And yet, as she banked the Apache sharply to avoid a simulated obstacle, a small shadow flickered beneath the rotor blades. Something real, something unplanned. A loose cable, a gust of wind, or perhaps fate itself, loomed directly in her flight path. The machine trembled slightly, the vibration resonating through her seat. One wrong adjustment, one moment of hesitation, and the delicate balance she had achieved could shatter in an instant. Sarah's heart didn't race with fear, it surged with anticipation. She had trained for this moment, visualized every contingency, and prepared her mind and body for the impossible. Yet the moment still carried the raw edge of danger, the thrill that comes when skill meets uncertainty. She glanced down at the shadow below the rotor blades. It moved. It was not part of the simulation, and for the first time she realized the real test was about to begin. The shadow beneath the rotors wasn't just a trick of the light. It was a civilian drone, buzzing unexpectedly into her flight path, metal glinting in the sun as it careened toward her Apache. Alarms screamed inside the cockpit, lights flashing red, and a shrill warning tone set her nerves on fire, not from fear, but from absolute focus. Sarah's mind clicked into overdrive. Years of simulator training, hours of late-night flight theory, emergency protocols drilled into muscle memory, all of it came alive in a single fluid sequence. Her left hand nudged the cyclic, right hand adjusting throttle, feet pressing pedals in a rhythm only she could hear. The Apache tilted violently, blades slicing through the air, a deadly dance of metal and wind. Below, mechanics ducked instinctively, some shielding their faces as if the helicopter might explode midair. Officers clutched railings, jaws tight, eyes wide. The general, leaning over the railing above, froze. Laughter was gone. Sarcastic quips vanished. Only astonishment remained, raw and unguarded. Sarah banked sharply, the drone skimming past by mere inches. Her heart thumped, not with panic but with exhilaration. Adrenaline surged, sweet and sharp, fueling precision rather than chaos. She could feel the Apache responding to every subtle shift of her weight, every micro-adjustment of the controls. It was as though she and the machine were breathing together, moving as one entity in the turbulent air. The general muttered under his breath, voice barely audible, "Impossible, how is she doing that?" Officers around him exchanged whispers. "Did she just? She's not even supposed to." Every comment trailed off as Sarah executed another maneuver, flipping the machine slightly, banking over the trees with impossible agility. But skill alone was not enough. The drone had been a warning. Sarah knew the real test was coming, the kind you couldn't simulate, the kind that required instinct, nerve, and split-second decision-making under life-or-death pressure. A sudden gust of wind whipped across the hangar opening, pushing the Apache dangerously close to the edge of controlled flight. The rotor blades caught it at an angle, shuddering violently. The entire aircraft vibrated through her seat, warning lights flickering like strobe signals. Sarah exhaled through her visor, steadying herself. Years of preparation had led to this exact moment. Every emergency protocol she had memorized, every minute spent in the simulator visualizing disasters, engine failures, rotor malfunctions, sudden obstacles, was now a vivid, living exercise. Her hands moved with fluid precision, instinct guiding her actions faster than conscious thought. Below, the ground crew held their breath. The mechanics' faces were pale, hands gripping whatever they could find. Officers leaned forward, eyes wide, silent prayers caught in their throats. The general's fingers drummed the railing, almost imperceptibly, betraying the tension he could not voice. He had joked, underestimated her, assumed she would falter. But now, for the first time, doubt had crept into his mind. Sarah tilted the Apache sharply, swooping over the treetops. Her visor reflected the sun in a kaleidoscope of light, shadows darting across the cockpit. The rotor blades whined, a low, dangerous song that resonated through her chest. Every second was a gamble. One miscalculation, one misjudged angle, and the helicopter could spiral into disaster. And yet she remained calm, almost eerily composed. "Think, it, predict, react," she whispered to herself, a mantra drilled into her from day one. Her eyes darted to the instruments: altitude, pitch, engine performance, hydraulic pressure. Everything was within normal parameters, but the margin for error was microscopic. The drone, though now behind her, remained a symbol of unexpected danger, a reminder that no simulation could prepare anyone fully for reality. Suddenly, a radio crackled from the ground, frantic. "Captain Thompson, we didn't authorize that maneuver. Watch your six." Sarah responded instantly, not with words but with action. She rolled the Apache sharply, aligning with a narrow gap between two towering pine trees. The rotor tip skimmed dangerously close to branches, slicing the air with a lethal hiss. She tilted, adjusted, banked, and the machine responded perfectly, moving in harmony with her intentions. The general's face appeared on the screen feed again. His jaw was tight, eyes wide, a mixture of awe and something else, humility creeping like a shadow. He had underestimated her, and now the realization burned like ice in his veins. Laughter was gone. Sarcasm had vanished. Only raw, undeniable skill existed before him. Sarah took a deep breath, every muscle in her body alive with focus. The Apache was more than metal and hydraulics. It was a living challenge demanding respect. Each adjustment, each correction was calculated, precise, and deliberate. Even as the engines vibrated violently under the strain, she remained perfectly in control, her mind a symphony of mechanics, physics, and instinct. And then, without warning, the first real challenge struck. A warning light flashed, left engine temperature spiking, pressure fluctuating. The Apache lurched violently, threatening to tip. A bead of sweat traced her temple, but her fingers moved faster than thought, adjusting throttle, cyclic, and collective in perfect sequence. The aircraft responded to her touch like an extension of herself, teetering between disaster and mastery. The ground crew gasped collectively. The general froze, hand gripping the railing, eyes wide. "How?" he muttered, barely audible. The officers whispered, some trembling. Every eye was glued to the machine dancing through the sky, every nerve on edge. Sarah was alone, yet completely in control, facing challenges no one had dared anticipate. She banked again, narrowly avoiding a gust that could have torn the Apache into the forest below. Her visor reflected the sunlight in blinding shards. Her heart pounded, not with fear but exhilaration, the pure adrenaline of survival paired with mastery. Every instinct, every calculation, every ounce of preparation was alive, firing simultaneously. The drone had been the first obstacle, a minor test. The wind, the fluctuating engine, the razor-thin margins between safety and disaster, these were the true challenge. Sarah's mind, trained for this very moment, calculated every trajectory, every possible contingency instantly. She moved with the precision of a surgeon and the confidence of a veteran. The general, watching, was slowly realizing that his joke had become a demonstration of legendary skill. As she leveled the Apache for a moment, hovering above the forest, her thoughts flicked to the next challenge. This was only the beginning. The wind was unpredictable. Mechanical systems could fail. A single misstep could prove catastrophic. Yet for all the danger, all the tension, Sarah felt a surge of clarity and power. She had taken the joke. She had turned it into a proving ground. And now, as the forest loomed below and the sky stretched endlessly above, she knew the real test, the one that would define her, was about to begin. The Apache shuddered violently. The left engine's gauge flickered erratically, spitting red warnings across Sarah's console. She gritted her teeth, eyes narrowing behind the visor. This wasn't simulated. This wasn't training. This was real, raw, and dangerous. A sudden mechanical failure at 300 feet above ground, with no safety net. The roar of the twin engines vibrated through the cockpit, rattling her seat and echoing through her chest like a war drum. Below, the dense forest stretched endlessly. Trees swayed violently in the gusting wind, branches threatening to shear off the rotor tips. The drone she had avoided earlier had vanished, but a new, invisible danger pressed against her. The Apache lurched again. Warning lights flashed. Every muscle in Sarah's body tightened instinctively. Calmness wasn't an option, it was mandatory. She engaged the auxiliary systems. Airspeed adjusted, thrust redistributed. The Apache groaned in protest but obeyed. Fingers flew over the cyclic, pedals pressed instinctively. Her mind, a razor-sharp instrument, calculated angles, rotor speeds, thrust adjustments, and potential landing zones simultaneously. One false move and the machine, her lifeline, would plummet into the forest below. Over the comms, voices shouted in alarm. "Captain Thompson, we're tracking engine temperature spikes. Adjust throttle immediately." Sarah nodded, even though they couldn't see it. Her voice remained steady, calm, precise. "Copy, adjusting, stabilizing now." She had no time for hesitation. Hesitation could mean death. The wind surged again, ripping across the fuselage. Dust and debris swirled in chaotic vortices, clawing at her visor, at her gloves, at the edges of reality itself. She banked sharply, rolling the Apache to counteract the turbulence. Each adjustment had to be exact. Too much tilt, and the left rotor could fail entirely. Too little, and the aircraft could spin out of control. The general, watching the live feed from the hangar office, suddenly went pale. His smirk from the morning briefing was gone, replaced with rigid tension. She's managing it," he whispered, barely audible. Officers nearby exchanged glances, disbelief and awe etched across their faces. None of them had expected a first solo flight to descend into real danger, and even fewer had expected Sarah to handle it with such mastery. Sarah's mind raced. She calculated landing options among the forest below. Trees were dense, uneven, and unforgiving. The river was a thin ribbon of hope, a possible escape, but with a dangerous current and steep banks. One misjudgment could flip the Apache into the water, leaving her with no room for error. Sweat ran down her temple, but she ignored it. Fear was irrelevant, focus was everything. Another gust ripped across the rotors. The Apache shuddered violently, warning alarms shrieking in her ears. Instruments flickered. Hydraulic pressure fluctuated. Her heart pounded with adrenaline, but her fingers moved automatically, instinctively. She tilted, banked, nudged the collective, adjusted the pedals, and the machine stabilized barely. A bead of sweat fell onto her glove, a tiny reminder of her mortality amid the mechanical chaos. Below, the forest seemed almost alive, ready to claim the helicopter if she faltered. Sarah's eyes scanned constantly, searching for subtle changes in terrain, shadows, and potential obstacles. Every second stretched into eternity. The ground crew's whispers could almost be heard. She's alive, but how? Then, through the roar of the engines and the shriek of warning alarms, Sarah noticed it. A small, almost imperceptible dip in altitude. The left engine was losing power slowly, almost sneakily. It wasn't catastrophic yet, but the margin for error was disappearing by the second. She calculated the distance to the nearest open landing zone, an emergency strip the base had cleared for training purposes, but it was barely visible among the swaying trees. The river, a dangerous yet tempting option, glittered below like a silver thread. She exhaled sharply, steadying herself. "Focus," she whispered almost to herself. "Focus, adjust, execute." She nudged the cyclic, countering the dip, increasing thrust from the auxiliary systems, adjusting the collective and pedals in a precise sequence. The Apache responded, groaning in protest but stabilizing. The general's face appeared again on the live feed, this time etched with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and dawning respect. His hand gripped the edge of the control panel. He had assumed this was a joke. He had assumed Sarah would falter. But now every instinct screamed at him. She was in control and he had underestimated her. Sarah banked the Apache over the forest, seeking a safe approach to the emergency strip. Branches whipped dangerously close, rotor blades slicing through the air mere feet above their tips. Dust and leaves spiraled around her cockpit like a storm. Every calculation, every adjustment, had to be perfect. One misstep could send her crashing into the dense undergrowth. A sudden squawk from the radar alert system added to the tension. The left rotor's hydraulic pressure was dropping faster than expected. Red warning lights flashed violently. She was running out of time, and the emergency landing strip was still hundreds of feet away, narrow and partially obscured by a thick canopy. She could feel the Apache fighting her, a living, breathing machine resisting every command as if testing her will. Her eyes scanned the terrain, searching for any alternative. The river beckoned, treacherous, unpredictable, but a lifeline if she could make it. The forest floor below was a gamble, every tree a potential coffin. Her mind worked with surgical precision, calculating descent angles, speed, rotor tilt, thrust, and potential impact points, all in a matter of seconds. She leaned forward in the cockpit, visor fogging slightly from sweat and adrenaline. Fingers moved over the controls like a pianist performing a deadly symphony. She tilted the Apache slightly, banking toward the emergency strip. Her stomach tightened, but her hands and mind were steady. The rotors whined, groaning under stress, but they obeyed. The general's voice broke through the radio, trembling slightly. "Captain Thompson, if you make this, if you survive, I don't know what to say." She allowed herself the barest hint of a smile. Words weren't necessary. Every move, every decision, every controlled maneuver spoke louder than any voice. She banked sharply again, hovering precisely, adjusting for the wind, the terrain, and the failing engine. And then the unthinkable happened. A branch obscured by the dense canopy whipped toward the Apache, striking the tail rotor with a sharp, metallic clang. The helicopter jolted violently, alarms screaming as if the machine itself had flinched. Sarah's hands reacted instinctively. She corrected the tilt, recalibrated thrust, and stabilized the aircraft midair. Her heart raced, chest pounding, sweat stinging her eyes, but the Apache obeyed. Below, the ground crew gasped. The officers in the hangar office leaned forward, almost unable to breathe. And the general, his face pale, sank slightly against the railing, disbelief etched into every line of his expression. The joke, the morning briefing, the teasing, the underestimation, was gone. All that remained was raw, undeniable mastery in action. Sarah's mind, still razor-sharp, calculated the final approach. The emergency strip was close, just over the next ridge. She could make it, but only if she executed every move perfectly. Every miscalculation, every hesitation would be fatal. Her pulse surged with adrenaline, not fear. This was what she had trained for. This was what she was born to do. As she aligned the Apache for the landing, every officer in the room held their breath, and even the general's mind was silent with tension. The impossible had only just begun. The forest below stretched like a green sea, treetops swaying violently under the gusts of wind. Sarah Viper, Thompson's eyes flicked between her instruments and the landscape rushing up to meet her. The Apache groaned with every tilt, every correction, as if testing her resolve. The left engine's warning still blinked furiously, a red staccato in her peripheral vision. There was no margin for error. One misstep, and the helicopter could tumble into the trees, leaving nothing behind but twisted metal and shattered ambition. Her heart pounded, not with fear but with the sharpened thrill of survival. This was what she lived for, moments when skill, instinct, and courage collided at the edge of possibility. Every muscle in her body was alive with tension, reacting instinctively, yet perfectly controlled. The rotors screamed above her, slicing through the air like a predator, and the wind clawed at the fuselage as if to throw her off balance. Below, the emergency landing strip glimmered faintly through a narrow clearing, a lifeline amidst the forest's chaotic green. It was her only option. The river twisted nearby, dangerous and fast, a beautiful ribbon that promised certain failure if misjudged. She weighed her options, calculating angles, thrust, and descent with the precision of a seasoned pilot. There was no time for hesitation. Every second mattered. The Apache lurched violently as the left engine struggled again. Warning alarms shrieked, sending vibrations through her gloves and seat. Sweat stung her eyes, but she ignored it. Focus was everything. Fingers flew over the cyclic and collective, toes adjusting the pedals in a rhythm that could only come from instinct sharpened by training and determination. She tilted, banked, and nudged the aircraft into alignment with the strip. The general, watching from the hangar office hundreds of feet away, went pale. His jaw slackened as the live feed displayed the scene, the Apache swaying dangerously above a narrow, partially obscured landing zone. Officers whispered in disbelief. "She's actually going to make it," one murmured, unable to hide the awe in his voice. Sarah's visor fogged slightly as she exhaled sharply, keeping her mind razor-focused. Trees loomed on either side, branches clawing at the air around her. The rotors whined like a living thing, protesting every movement, yet responding flawlessly to her precise adjustments. She banked the helicopter just enough to avoid a looming pine, then leveled it for the final approach. Her pulse surged, adrenaline carving a hot line down her spine. Every second stretched into eternity. The strip below was narrow, uneven, partially hidden by shadows. One miscalculation could send her crashing into the surrounding trees or ricocheting into the forest floor. She visualized the landing in her mind, rehearsed it silently. Descend slowly, maintain rotor speed, correct drift, touch down lightly. Execute flawlessly. The Apache lurched again, the left engine sputtering dangerously. Red warning lights blinked frantically. She adjusted thrust, nudged the cyclic, and countered with the pedals. The helicopter groaned under the strain, each adjustment a battle between human skill and mechanical limitation. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady, her mind razor-sharp. The river beside the strip shimmered, a cruel reminder of what could happen if she misjudged her descent. Water splashing would be the last thing she ever saw. She blocked the thought, focusing entirely on the landing zone, the clearing, the precise alignment required. The ground crew's voices crackled faintly over the comms. "Captain Thompson, you're too close to the tree line. Adjust." Her hands moved almost on instinct, banking the Apache slightly, trimming the collective to steady descent. Every command she executed was exacting, flawless, the culmination of years of preparation and training. The general's voice broke over the radio, trembling slightly. I can't believe it, just hold it steady." His usual sardonic tone had vanished entirely. Officers whispered in disbelief around him. The laughter, mockery, and doubt from the morning briefing had evaporated, replaced by raw admiration and awe. Sarah was no longer the subject of a joke. She was legend in motion. The Apache dipped lower, rotors whistling dangerously close to treetops. Branches whipped past, scraping against the fuselage, leaving small streaks of paint and wood splinters. She felt the machine resist every command, pushing her to the edge of control, yet responding with precision. Every fiber of her being was engaged, every calculation exact. Finally, the emergency strip was directly beneath her. She adjusted the collective slowly, allowing the helicopter to settle toward the ground. Dust and debris erupted around the landing zone as rotor wash interacted with loose soil and leaves. Her fingers quivered slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the moment. The Apache shuddered one final time as the rotors skimmed dangerously close to the strip's edge. Sarah kept the descent steady, muscles taut, mind perfectly focused. The left engine groaned, a low, threatening hum, but she compensated, balancing thrust and tilt with unmatched precision. And then she touched down. The landing was textbook perfect, though the strip was narrow and uneven. The rotors whipped the air violently, scattering leaves and dust like a storm, yet the Apache remained stable. Sarah exhaled, shoulders relaxing slightly, though her hands remained firmly on the controls, eyes scanning the surroundings. The machine was alive, responsive, and under control, her control. Below, the ground crew erupted into cheers and applause. Officers clapped, some nearly falling over in their excitement. The general sank into a nearby railing, pale, jaw slack, eyes wide with disbelief. The morning joke had turned into an exhibition of unmatched skill, courage, and nerve. The captain who had been underestimated, mocked, and joked about had executed the impossible. Sarah finally allowed herself a small smile, sweat dripping down her brow, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She had faced the unexpected, adapted instantly, and survived. Not just survived, she had mastered every challenge thrown at her, turning danger into triumph. And yet, as she shut down the left engine's auxiliary systems, another alert blared faintly on the console, one she hadn't anticipated. The first emergency was over, but the fight was far from done. The general, watching from above, felt a sinking realization. This was no longer a joke, and Sarah Thompson's legend had only just begun. Sarah Thompson's fingers trembled slightly as she stabilized the Apache on the narrow strip, the rotors whirling like a living beast above her. The wind still howled through the trees, teasing the helicopter, testing her mastery even as she exhaled, focusing on every sensor, every gauge. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the pure intensity of what she had just accomplished. She had landed a failing helicopter on an emergency strip barely wide enough for the fuselage. The impossible had been made real. Below, the ground crew erupted in cautious cheers, but the celebration was tempered by the knowledge that she was not yet done. The left engine's auxiliary systems hummed faintly, stabilizing, but the warning lights continued to flicker, a subtle reminder that danger had not vanished. Sarah's gaze flicked over the instruments, calculating, analyzing, planning. Every second was precious. The general, who had watched the landing from the hangar office, was pale, his smirk long gone. He sank to a chair, jaw slack, staring at the live feed in disbelief. "She actually did it," he muttered under his breath. Officers around him whispered similar phrases, awe and shock written across every face. The morning joke, meant to humiliate Sarah, had become a demonstration of raw, unmatched skill. Sarah's visor reflected sunlight off the rotors, fragments of light scattering across the cockpit like shards of crystal. Dust swirled around the landing strip, stirred by the rotors, dancing in chaotic spirals. The smell of heated metal and hydraulic fluid filled the air. The forest was quiet now, almost holding its breath, as if acknowledging the precision, courage, and nerve that had tamed the roaring machine above it. She exhaled, letting the adrenaline wash over her, but her focus never wavered. She knew better than to celebrate yet. The first emergency had been survived, but another was already on the horizon. The instruments flickered again, a subtle anomaly she recognized instantly. The left engine, already weakened, was still struggling. Her fingers danced over the controls, nudging the throttle, adjusting rotor tilt, and balancing the collective with practiced precision. The Apache responded, stabilizing but groaning in protest. The wind picked up again, gusting across the clearing, testing the limits of the rotor wash. Dust and debris swirled violently, striking the fuselage and cockpit. Sarah adjusted, compensating, every movement measured, precise, instinctive. Each second felt like an eternity. Below, the ground crew's eyes followed her every motion, breaths held collectively. And then, as if the universe itself were conspiring to escalate the challenge, a sudden warning blared across the cockpit. An emergency obstacle had been detected in the approach path. A fallen tree, partially hidden by the shadows of the forest, now threatened the Apache's descent for any further maneuver. The sensors indicated that avoiding it would require rapid adjustment, one miscalculation fatal. Sarah's hands reacted instinctively. She banked sharply, rolling the Apache slightly to the left, adjusting throttle and collective in perfect harmony. The rotors whined, the fuselage groaning as the aircraft obeyed every subtle nuance of her command. Below, the forest seemed to close in, branches swaying as if reaching for the machine. She threaded the helicopter between the trees, inches from catastrophe. The general, still watching the live feed, sank further into his chair, hand gripping the railing. His eyes widened as the Apache responded flawlessly to Sarah's instinctive adjustments. Officers whispered, some nearly speechless. The laughter of the morning had long vanished, replaced by awe and disbelief. Sarah exhaled sharply, focusing entirely on the final approach. The landing strip stretched below, narrow, uneven, partially obscured by shadows. She could feel every vibration, every shift in wind, every quiver of the rotor blades. The left engine groaned faintly, reminding her that danger had not vanished. It was only lying in wait. She adjusted the collective slowly, descending cautiously, eyes scanning the strip for any irregularities. Dust swirled, kicked up by the rotor wash, creating a chaotic blur that made precise alignment difficult. She nudged the cyclic slightly, correcting for drift, adjusting rotor pitch to maintain stability. Every movement was deliberate, exact, and crucial. The river shimmered faintly nearby, a constant reminder of the deadly consequences of failure. One misstep, one hesitation, and the Apache would not touch the strip. It would plunge into the water below. Her pulse surged with adrenaline, a mixture of focus and exhilaration sharpening every sense. A mechanical warning flared again. The hydraulic pressure on the left rotor fluctuated dangerously. Sarah's mind worked at lightning speed, calculating adjustments, distributing thrust, stabilizing the helicopter. The Apache groaned under the strain but obeyed. She felt the tension in every bolt, every panel, every fiber of the machine. Below, the ground crew's voices crackled through the comms, half shouts, half cheers. "You're clear, almost, hold steady." The general's voice trembled faintly. I can't believe she's doing this." Officers whispered, eyes wide, disbelief etched into every line of their faces. Sarah had taken the impossible and made it reality, yet she remained hyper-focused, knowing one error could undo it all. The final descent required perfect alignment. The strip was narrow, uneven, and partially hidden by shadows. Sarah tilted the Apache slightly, nudging it forward, correcting drift with tiny adjustments to the pedals. The rotors hummed a tense, dangerous melody, vibrating through the fuselage, through her gloves, through her very bones. She touched down gently, rotor tips barely skimming the edges of the strip. Dust and debris erupted violently, whipping around the helicopter, yet the machine remained perfectly balanced. Sarah exhaled slowly, shoulders tense, hands steady, eyes scanning the surroundings. The left engine groaned faintly but held. Below, the ground crew erupted in cheers, clapping, some nearly falling over in excitement. Officers high-fived and shouted in disbelief. The general sank back against the railing, face pale, jaw slack, eyes wide. The morning's joke, the teasing, the underestimation, was gone, replaced by a living demonstration of unmatched skill, nerve, and precision. Sarah allowed herself a small smile, sweat dripping down her brow. She had survived, she had conquered, and she had done the impossible. But she didn't relax. The alert still flashed faintly on the console, another warning, another challenge waiting in the wings. She was ready. Somewhere deep in the hangar, the general's mind raced. This wasn't a joke. This was real. And he had just witnessed a legend in motion. Captain Sarah Thompson, the pilot who had turned his mockery into awe, who had made the impossible landing look effortless, and who had only just begun. Sarah Viper Thompson had just executed what most pilots would call impossible, a perfect, controlled landing under life-threatening conditions. Her hands hovered over the controls, every sense alert, every muscle ready. The Apache sat before her like a mechanical predator, exhausted yet obedient, as though acknowledging her mastery. The forest, the wind, the hazards, all had been conquered, or so it seemed. But the warning lights flickering faintly on the console reminded her that the challenge was far from over. The left engine, though stabilized temporarily, remained compromised. Sensors flickered, indicating heat anomalies and minor fluctuations in rotor hydraulics. The momentary calm was only a lull before the storm. Sarah knew that the next phase would test everything: her skill, her nerves, her courage. The general, pale and rigid, was still staring at the live feed from the hangar office. Officers whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others murmuring awe. "She's beyond exceptional," one said. "I can't believe she just—" Another stopped mid-sentence, staring as Sarah prepared the Apache for takeoff. Takeoff, simple in theory, but under these conditions, nothing was simple. Sarah adjusted her harness, tested the hydraulics, monitored engine temperature, and scanned the surrounding forest. Every step required precision. One miscalculation would undo everything she had achieved. The ground crew shouted cautions over the comms. "Captain Thompson, we're still tracking anomalies in the left rotor. Take off at your own risk." Sarah didn't respond verbally. Her hands moved instinctively, nudging the cyclic, adjusting collective, pressing pedals in perfect sequence. The Apache responded, lifting smoothly, almost eerily calm under her control. The forest seemed to hold its breath as she ascended, rotor tips narrowly avoiding branches. Sunlight fractured across her visor, shadows slicing the cockpit like jagged lines. The left engine groaned faintly, red warnings flickering, but Sarah's adjustments kept the aircraft stable. Her mind raced. She knew what the general was thinking. The same thoughts that had filled the hangar with laughter hours before, doubt, mockery, amusement, were now replaced by disbelief and unease. She had turned the joke into proof of skill, and the next test would cement her legend. Suddenly, a new alert blared. The onboard radar indicated multiple obstacles approaching fast, unidentified drones, fast-moving, small and aggressive, possibly automated for testing evasive maneuvers. They zipped through the air like metallic wasps, converging on the Apache with precise coordination. Sarah's pulse surged. This wasn't mechanical failure. This was an active challenge. She banked sharply, narrowly avoiding a collision with a drone darting from the left. Her hands moved with the fluid precision of someone in perfect harmony with the aircraft. Each movement was preemptive, anticipating the drone's next trajectory. Below, the ground crew's collective gasp echoed through the comms. Officers in the hangar leaned forward, eyes wide, mouths open. Even the general, pale and tense, muttered under his breath, "She-ka," before trailing off. Sarah's mastery defied their expectations. One drone struck the rotor wash violently, spinning dangerously close. She corrected instinctively, countering the torque with subtle adjustments. The Apache groaned but obeyed. Her pulse surged, not with fear but exhilaration. The thrill of life-or-death mastery coursed through her, sharpening every reflex. Then came the unexpected. Sensors indicated a mechanical anomaly, secondary failure. Hydraulic pressure on the left rotor began dropping again, faster this time. The aircraft shuddered violently, alarms shrieking through the cockpit. Dust and debris from rotor wash swirled around the clearing as the Apache teetered. Sarah's mind clicked into survival mode. Take evasive action, stabilize, maintain altitude, prepare emergency landing. Her hands moved with split-second precision, nudging cyclic, adjusting throttle, balancing the collective. The Apache responded, groaning in protest but remaining airborne. The drones advanced again, zigzagging with lethal intent. Sarah banked sharply, narrowly missing one as its wing clipped a tree. The rotors whined dangerously, but she held the aircraft steady, anticipating the next move. The left engine groaned, the dashboard blinking ominously. One mistake now would be fatal. The general stood, gripping the railing tightly, eyes wide. His morning mockery had evaporated entirely, replaced by awe, disbelief, and something else, fear. She's going to do it," he muttered, almost unwilling to acknowledge it. Officers whispered the same, some muttering prayers under their breath. Sarah leveled the Apache midair, eyes scanning constantly. The drones converged from multiple directions, forcing her to calculate evasive maneuvers in real time. Each bank, tilt, and throttle adjustment required perfect timing. One miscalculation, one misjudged speed, and the Apache would collide or the failing rotor would give out. She dove toward a small clearing, using it as a pivot point. The drones zipped past, narrowly missing rotor tips. The aircraft trembled, warning lights flickering. Her pulse surged, adrenaline sharpening her instincts. She nudged the cyclic gently, correcting drift, adjusting collective, balancing the machine like a master performing an impossible ballet. The left engine groaned, red warnings flashing violently. Sarah's hands moved with flawless precision. She tilted, banked, corrected, anticipating the drone's trajectory and the shifting wind patterns. The forest below blurred as she maneuvered, sunlight fracturing across her visor. Every second stretched like eternity. Finally, she executed the final move, a precise, razor-thin maneuver threading the Apache between trees, using a combination of skill, instinct, and machine response. The drones scattered, unable to follow, their attack neutralized by her calculated flight path. The Apache stabilized, hovering perfectly above the clearing. Below, the ground crew erupted in cheers. Officers in the hangar clapped and shouted, some nearly fainting in disbelief. The general sank against the railing, face pale, jaw slack, eyes wide. He had witnessed the impossible. Captain Thompson, the pilot he had mocked, had not only survived mechanical failure and life-threatening hazards, but had also outmaneuvered multiple aggressive drones in real time. Sarah allowed herself a brief smile. The battle was won. The Apache trembled slightly beneath her, warning lights still flickering, but she had triumphed. She had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Yet even as relief surged through her, she knew this wasn't the end. Every alert, every anomaly, every unexpected hazard reminded her the sky was never truly safe. And in the world of the Apache, true mastery was a dance on the razor's edge, one she had now proven she could navigate like no other. The general, still pale and trembling, whispered under his breath, "She wasn't just skilled, she's legendary." And deep in the cockpit, Sarah adjusted the controls, prepared for whatever came next, knowing the story was far from over. The wind still howled, slicing across the forest and tugging at the Apache as if testing every ounce of skill Sarah Viper Thompson had mastered. The left engine groaned faintly, sensors flickering, warning lights blinking a frantic red. Every nerve in her body was alive with focus. The drones were gone, the mechanical anomalies still loomed, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she could not fail, not now, not ever. The general's voice crackled faintly over the comms, shaky, almost reverent. "Captain Thompson, you've done the impossible already, but keep your focus. Bring her home safely." The sarcasm, mockery, and casual amusement of earlier had vanished completely. The man who had laughed at her mere presence was now trembling, awe and humility etched into every line of his face. Sarah adjusted the collective slightly, stabilizing the Apache in a hovering stance above the clearing. Dust swirled around the landing strip, rotor wash kicking leaves and debris into chaotic spirals. Her pulse surged with adrenaline, not fear, but exhilarating clarity. Every movement mattered. Every second was a calculation of life and death. The emergency strip, narrow and uneven, was her only option. She could see the glint of sunlight off its far edge, the final destination in her perilous ballet. The forest, still dense and treacherous, closed in around her. One misjudged angle, one miscalculated descent, and the Apache would be torn apart among the trees or sent spiraling into the river below. She exhaled slowly, letting her mind sharpen into a single razor-edged focus. Every instrument, every gauge, every subtle vibration in the cockpit was alive to her senses. She nudged the cyclic gently, adjusted throttle incrementally, and balanced the collective with precise minute corrections. The Apache trembled under the strain but obeyed. Below, the ground crew held their collective breath. Officers in the hangar watched the live feed with faces etched in disbelief, some whispering prayers, others simply unable to tear their eyes away. The general, pale and rigid, gripped the railing, watching every second. This was no joke. This was the reality of Sarah Thompson, skilled, fearless, and unflinching. A gust of wind clawed across the clearing, tipping the Apache slightly. Warning lights flashed violently. Sarah's hands moved instinctively, correcting tilt, adjusting throttle and pedals. The left engine groaned, nearly spitting flames in its protest, yet the aircraft responded to her every nuanced command. Each adjustment was calculated, deliberate, perfect. The rotors whipped the air into chaos, scattering debris, kicking up dust clouds that twisted in erratic spirals. She aligned the Apache over the landing strip, tiny adjustments here and there, banking slightly, trimming rotor tilt, nudging collective. The machine trembled, sensors flashing, yet held steady. The general whispered under his breath, "Impossible, Shika." His voice trailed off, eyes wide, jaw slack. He had assumed Sarah would falter, would hesitate, would fail spectacularly. But he had been utterly wrong. She had turned the morning's mockery into a symphony of unmatched skill, courage, and nerve. Sarah's eyes scanned the strip, calculating distance, alignment, slope, rotor wash effects. The left engine flared once more, red lights blinking violently. She compensated instantly, redistributing thrust, adjusting cyclic and pedals, banking just enough to offset torque. The Apache responded as though it had been designed specifically for her. Below, the ground crew erupted into cautious cheers, some clapping, some shouting, some frozen in disbelief. The officers in the hangar leaned forward, eyes wide, whispering phrases like, "She's unstoppable. I've never seen anything like this. And that's insane." Finally, the critical moment arrived. The Apache hovered just above the strip. Sarah reduced collective incrementally, letting the helicopter descend slowly, deliberately. Dust and leaves swirled around, rotor wash whipping the clearing into a chaotic storm. Every adjustment was precise. Every move mattered. The left engine groaned, sensors flashing red, but she remained perfectly balanced. Her pulse raced with adrenaline, every muscle taut, every reflex primed. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The clearing seemed impossibly narrow, yet she threaded the Apache through it like a needle in motion. The rotor tip skimming the edges of the strip, she landed. Lightly, perfectly, controlled, alive. The Apache shuddered slightly, but the aircraft held. Dust and debris swirled violently, yet she remained seated, hands steady on the controls, eyes alert, every sense alive. Below, the ground crew exploded in cheers, applause, and shouts of disbelief. Officers in the hangar slapped each other on the back, some even falling to their knees in awe. And the general, he sank completely into a chair, pale, trembling, jaw slack. The smirk of the morning was gone forever. What had been intended as a joke, a test of humiliation, had become a testament to human skill, courage, and determination. For a long moment, silence filled the cockpit. The rotors hummed a low, steady thrum. The wind calmed slightly. The dust settled. And Sarah finally allowed herself to exhale fully, shoulders relaxing just a fraction. She had done it. She had survived the impossible, mastered the impossible, and turned a mockery into a legend. The general's voice finally broke the silence over the comms, trembling and almost reverent. "Captain Thompson, I underestimated you. You've shown me what true skill, nerve, and courage look like. You're extraordinary." Sarah's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. She didn't respond verbally. No words could capture what had just happened. Every move, every decision, every perfect execution of the impossible spoke louder than any praise. Officers and ground crew crowded around, their admiration palpable. Whispers of legend, unbelievable, and impossible filled the air. The Apache, still humming beneath her hands, seemed to acknowledge the triumph, quivering slightly under the tension released, yet obedient, alive, and perfectly controlled. The general, finally collecting himself, rose slowly. He approached the landing strip, steps tentative, almost reverent. When he reached the Apache, he stopped, looked at Sarah through the cockpit and shook his head in disbelief. I don't even have words. You've turned my joke into something no one could have imagined. I am ashamed I doubted you." Sarah tilted her head slightly, letting a small, proud smile touch her lips. She had turned mockery into mastery, fear into triumph, and disbelief into awe. In that moment, the general realized he was not merely witnessing a skilled pilot. He was witnessing a legend in the making. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the clearing and glinting off the rotor blades. Dust swirled gently in the afternoon air. The forest seemed to exhale, as if acknowledging the culmination of an impossible feat. Sarah's hands rested lightly on the controls, the Apache humming beneath her like a coiled spring ready for the next challenge. And somewhere deep inside, the knowledge settled. This was only the beginning. She had faced danger, mechanical failure, impossible obstacles, and mockery, and emerged unbroken, masterful, and legendary. The sky had tested her. The world had mocked her, and she had proven that nothing, no obstacle, no doubt, no fear, could stand in the way of skill, courage, and determination. The general finally looked away, pale, humbled, and silent. The morning's jokes, the sarcasm, the underestimation, all had evaporated. In their place remained awe, respect, and a quiet understanding that Sarah Thompson had just rewritten the rules of what was possible. And as the Apache sat perfectly aligned on the narrow strip, engines humming and rotors steady, Sarah Viper Thompson leaned back, a faint, triumphant smile on her lips, knowing she had not just survived the impossible, but had made the world witness her legend.